All right, welcome to Equity.Guru. I'm Chris Parry, founder, publisher, head honcho. I'm talking today to Stefan Quenneville from Ontario. Specifically today, we're going to talk about Diagnos, which is a company that we've been talking about on Equity.Guru for quite some time. Stefan, how did you get to be attached to Diagnos?
Well, I'm not attached to Diagnos. I cover the company for Echelon. So yeah. I'm an equity analyst at Echelon, and that's pretty much what I've done most of my career. I have a biology degree and an MBA from McGill. So I'm from Montreal originally and Canadian, and I've worked on the buy side and sell side, covering healthcare almost my entire career. So I started off at Desjardins. Then move over to Orion Securities. Orion was purchased by Macquarie. Then I moved over to the States, where I work for Morningstar as part of a team covering healthcare globally, a team of about 10 people actually. So it's much more focused in the States than in Canada. So I covered small mid-cap biotechs there for a number of years. I moved back to Canada, where I worked on the buy side. So I actually joined one of our clients at the time, which was Century Investments, which is a very Toronto-based company with a very strong track record of good returns, focused on North American long-only companies, where I was responsible primarily for the healthcare part of the portfolio. So I was an associate portfolio manager there. And then I about a year ago, I joined Echelon, getting back to what I like best, is focusing on sort of smaller, really innovative healthcare companies that I think have a lot of potential. That's sort of what I've always enjoyed doing, and getting back to what I enjoy most. So that's the story. And Diagnos is actually one of the companies I've identified as just, I think, kind of unique in the Canadian market. The Canadian market's a hodgepodge of companies, but I really think that there's a confluence of factors that are occurring today that are pretty unique in healthcare. AI is one of those drivers. There's also any technology that takes cost out of the system is a key driver for me, and of course one of the long-term drivers in healthcare, which is also tied to Diagnos, is just our lifestyle in rich countries as well as in developing countries, which is higher calorie, more sedentary, which leads to there's really a demographic inevitability of increased diabetes because of how we live. And Diagnos, if we want to get into in detail, they actually have an AI diagnostic tool that helps identify people with diabetic retinopathy. So this is a condition, an eye condition, which is the largest cause of blindness in adults, that is caused primarily by people who are diabetic. So they're when they have uncontrolled blood sugar, it causes a proliferation of blood vessels in the back of the eye, on the retina, which is the back of the eye. And when those blood vessels grow, it actually causes you to lose your vision in that eye or both eyes. So what's unique about the condition is that it's asymptomatic. You don't feel it happening, but from one day to the next, you can find yourself losing vision in your eye. So what they do as a company is, to diagnose this, you actually have to take a picture of the back of the eye using a special camera called a fundus camera. So when you go see your eye doctor, it's a typical thing they do, and they look for diabetic retinopathy and a number of other conditions using this type of image. So and it's important to do that because people, like I said, with diabetics, it's asymptomatic. So you have to do this on a regular basis. So it's recommended that every diabetic, and there's about 450 million diabetics in the world. Are you diabetic? Type 1 or type 2?
Type 2, but you're always close to type 1. I have a special interest in Diagnos because of that. I go to see the eye doctor every 6 months to make sure things haven't progressed. And I'm well aware that there are many things that the eye sort of presents that lead to the point to other conditions. And so the Diagnos technology, to me, the ability to deal with diabetics is interesting, but the ability to develop that on into other conditions really sort of opens up the company, I think, to becoming a big player down the road.
Oh, well, yeah, you hit the hammer on the head, like the nail on the head. I actually was going to get into the other applications that you can see, diagnostic applications from the back of the eye, the retina, and other types of images. I didn't want to start with that because I wanted to focus on what they've already got approved and they're already sort of commercializing. But there's a whole other blue sky part of the story that we can get to. But I think it's great that you know what I'm talking about as a diabetic and getting the regular screening, because there's sort of two larger problems with diabetic screening, and what's important to note is that it really makes sense to get diabetics screened for this, because like yourself, you have this condition, but you're still in the prime of your life. You're obviously a productive member of society, working, paying taxes. But if from one day to the next you lose your vision, you quickly become a important cost burden on the system. So insurers, or in countries like Canada, where I am, where it's more it's socialized medicine, it makes sense to invest in this sort of preventative screening, because there are ways to treat diabetic retinopathies. There's very good drugs. There's some laser treatments as well. So it's just a question of getting diabetics to do it, which is one thing. So there's an issue of not enough diabetics do it regularly. And then the other problem, and this is key to what Diagnos does, is that you have to triage the patients that have the most severe cases. So there's a grading system, R0 through R4. And what's important is to quickly identify the patients that are R3 or R4 and quickly get them to a retinal specialist for treatment, because they can, very quickly degenerate into losing their vision. And for in the vast majority of diabetics, likely like yourself, you go every 6 months or once a year, you're fine. They just monitor it. But if you do progress and it becomes more severe, they have to intervene. And like I said, it's worth investing in that, because saving someone's vision, especially if they're younger, it saves costs to the system and it saves costs to insurers. So it makes a lot of sense. So everyone should be motivated to find this type of solution.
Well, even just, going and doing that screening, it involves, setting an appointment, waiting 3 weeks to be able to get there, waiting half an hour in the waiting room, getting things put in your eye that clouds your vision. So you're going to have to get someone to drive you home afterwards. Like, it's an ordeal, just to just be preventative, let alone treating the actual condition. So the Diagnos technology, to me, the ability for me to potentially just go to the optometrist in a strip mall and get a test right there and then, have it sent back and analyzed, and the information then sent to my doctor, like, that's a complete improvement of life. And I guess a large reason why a lot of diabetics don't do the screening that they're supposed to is because it's such a pain in the ass. We've all got busy lives, we've got a lot to do, and taking a half a day every 6 months out of your system is it's a lot when you got kids, you got work, you got et cetera. Increasingly, though, the number of people who don't realize that they're type 2 diabetics, because there's no outward signs to say, you don't have the tingly toes, you're not losing vision, your blood sugar is out of whack and things are starting to go wrong in your body, until you're actually in it. Generally, people don't realize that they're even a risk of it. So the ability to just go and have a quick test that's non-invasive, when you're not even maybe presenting signs, is a real game changer to me.
Yeah, I mean, you could talk specifically about diabetes, or you talk about it in general. I think any technology that makes patients' lives easier and makes the healthcare provider's life easier, but works in their current, without changing how they do things in a dramatic way, because they don't like that either. And what I like about the Diagnos technology is that it takes something, just so you know, your doctor, when you say going in, it's a pain, you have to wait around and do all this, your doctor a retinal specialist doesn't want to be doing this type of procedure. They don't get paid a lot for it. It's a very low end thing. They get maybe $50 here. In the US, it's a bit more, maybe $70, because things are always more expensive in the US. But the bottom line is they do this so that they can then, in the patients that need the more expensive procedure, which are these injections in the eye of VEGF drugs like Eylea or Lucentis, or there's some laser procedures where they make a lot more money. So that's why they do the screening, but they do it to as a pipeline to actually do the more expensive procedures. So what they would ideally for them is that someone provides them with a pool of, qualified patients that really do need a more serious intervention, and then being able to make sure that they're the right candidate for those more expensive procedures. So that's why that's why a lot of people fall through the cracks, to be quite honest. Either the diabetics don't have an easy way to get the eye test, or the doctors don't have time to do them in some cases. That's why there's a need for more throughput, and then a more effective way to triage, which is the beauty of the Diagnos system, that you go there, all you need is a technician to take a picture of your eyes. Their AI/machine learning software does a fantastic job of identifying patients that are at risk and grading them in a very specific way, and then that gets passed on to the next step in the chain, which is get the R3 and R4 patients to see a retinal specialist. And they're, it's a very efficient way to do it. And their software works in the current workflow of most, whether it's a clinic or an optical retailer that have these type of cameras, right? They do it. And it also makes, both of those more efficient, because you just need someone who knows how to operate the camera to take a good photo. You don't have to interpret it. There's a whole telemedicine part where the report is created for the appropriate person. It doesn't have to be the person who took the photos. It's just someone else. They can be centralized, so one person could be covering multiple locations, and then quickly respond to that, and and then pass them on to the next part of the chain. And the beauty as well is the individuals doing it, whether it's an optical chain or a sort of lower level clinic, they like this because it's a revenue generator for them as well. So it sort of draws in patients. They're providing a higher value care to them. And the other part that's important from a diabetic perspective, as you know, is you have to go back. Typically, it's once a year if you're lower grade, and every 6 months if you're slightly higher grade, and they watch the progression. So that kind of call to action for an eye clinic is not typical, right? Because as you know, I wear glasses, and I don't know about you, but I don't go get my eyes checked every year. I go every couple of years, and I went back recently because I broke my glasses because I'm a klutz. And then I had to go again, and I think it was the first time in several number of years. And I was speaking with the eye doctor, and like, yeah, we'd love to have a call point like a dentist, where every 6 months you say go in and get your cleaning. Right. But for most of our patients, we don't have a call to action. We can't email them and say, hey, come in, you got to get your eyes checked, because people don't feel, unless they themselves are having problems seeing something, there's no call to action, right? So
it's a big process too. Like I remember last time I went to just get a regular eye check, non-diabetic, you go in, you do all the tests, the eye chart, the whole, cover this eye, cover that eye. And at the end, the guy said, well, you're old, go and get dollar store reading glasses. It was like, I just went through half an hour of this for that. I could have told you that myself.
Well, that's a good outcome. Like, at least you didn't say you had progressing diabetic retinopathy, right? You got to take what you can get, right? And so I sort of like, I talk about it from that perspective. The opportunity is very large, and this is a company whose technology, it's approved by the FDA, it's approved in Canada, approved in other jurisdictions, and it's their commercialization, I have to say, has been derailed a bit by COVID, because it's really stopped this, not just in this area, but a lot of more regular type procedures are not being done in our healthcare system, because there's been this sort of very stay in the eye conditions, very myopic focus on COVID, and to the detriment of a lot of other things. I mean, I think a lot of people also haven't been getting regular cancer screenings and things like that, which are also very serious things. So that's been a bit of a headwind for the company, but they've done a fantastic job connecting with optical clinics. They're rolling out with New Look in Canada, which is probably their first really big commercial clients. That is going to get them to an interesting revenue base, and it's going to show that there's a model where they can generate enough volume in each store at a reasonable price per test, sort of in the $5, I think $5 to $10 per diagnosis range is what they're looking at. And once they get this to scale, it's going to be a very attractive revenue model too. And once they prove it out with a real a large, reasonably well-known optical chain, and they're already, I think, at pretty good advanced talks with a number of big players. It's going to show the power of the technology and the revenue model as well. The other part of the story is that it's a SaaS revenue model. I mean, so once this is installed and people are using it, it goes up into the cloud. There's nobody working on the Diagnos side on it. It's just there's billing it and getting it.
Yeah.
So they have very minimal revenues currently, but as this rolls out, with New Look, and they also have a number of smaller clients that they've had for a while, who basically have not been doing a lot of testing just because of COVID. They're going to pick up as well. So if that all occurs sort of as we hope, the company's definitely moving in the right direction from that perspective.
I really like the business model of being able to expand outwards quickly across the country without having to actually invest in bricks and mortar, real estate, even salespeople. You're piggybacking on another company that already has a presence in every shopping mall, and to instantly become a national presence. That's great to me.
Yeah. And the point is just getting the stores up and running and figuring out the best way to integrate what they do into the day-to-day of each store. I know they've been working with New Look. I was actually speaking with the company, and they put together a sort of a training video, sort of a 5-minute video to sort of let the people know that this was coming and why it makes sense. And they've been piloting the technology in a number of stores, so they got a couple of the successful pilot individuals who were involved in it, explaining to their colleagues across the store network why it made a lot of sense, why it was good for the client, why it was good for them, and how they experienced it and made it work within the store. And that type of thing, it's got a multiplier effect. And obviously the learning that Diagnos is doing here, they're gonna piggyback on it, because developing an AI software is different than getting a human being to implement it in the store. And so they've worked out little kinks in how the software works and that type of workflow thing. But it's definitely there. And the other aspect about it that's important as well is they're actually providing the locations with a nice software tool that they don't typically have, which is an ability to watch the patient's sort of record and progress over time by keeping all the images in the cloud. So someone like yourself who goes regularly to get your screening done, oftentimes these old cameras are a bit like your old maybe before your iPhone, double-digit iPhone version, you have an old camera with a memory card, and a lot of people's records are on these memory card type systems at these eye clinics, and they're not really integrated in software, so you can't really watch the progress over time. It's just little images on a thing, and not easy to access by the healthcare provider if they don't have a good EHR system, which is okay. So they're actually providing a very sticky piece of software as well, which I like. So once they're in, they might be hard to displace as well.
For sure. I also like the fact that as they take more images over time, those images go towards growing their understanding, so that the product gets better the more it's used.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, it's that's one of the beauties of AI and machine learning is you know, it only gets better over time.
Mhm.
And like I said, so the last thing I want to say about the company that it's sort of underappreciated is that they've also announced that they have a MOU in place, a memorandum of understanding with EssilorLuxottica, which is by far the biggest player in eye care. For people who don't know the company, it's a multi-billion-dollar behemoth in the space, and it's actually a company that's the merger of the largest frame company, which is Luxottica, which is Italy-based, and Essilor, which is the largest lens company that was based in France, and it's it's a behemoth in the space.
Giant, for sure. I mean, that's generally every eyewear brand that people are familiar with. If you trace back its ownership, it all comes back to one of those large companies.
Yeah, your Ray-Bans are Luxottica, your Oakleys, and these are shades, but I mean, the glass brands as well, the frames, especially the higher end ones are often Luxottica as well, and the lenses also, which is an important part of the story, but also important with them is they're vertically integrated, so they have more retail eye clinics by more than like a factor of 10 than any other player in the world. So they have over 15,000 locations globally. They just did an acquisition of a Grand Vision, which is a Netherlands-based but primarily European eye care clinic group as well. So they're very big. Those 15,000 locations don't all have fundus cameras, so they're not, they're not all. Each of those locations is a potential Diagnos location, but about 8,000 have a fundus camera. So I mean, this is a huge opportunity for the company. To put that in context, New Look has about 400 locations across Canada. There's maybe a dozen in the U.S. So more than it's a massive opportunity for the company, and clearly it would be industry-wide validation. Even New Look is industry-wide validation. So one of the bigger retailers. Maybe
what's interesting to me about the Luxottica deal is that's a company that has been built around acquisitions traditionally, and at the moment they get a sense that Diagnos technology adds to them in a substantial way. I can't even imagine that they wouldn't come knocking on the door looking to make an acquisition of the company.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense from that perspective. I mean, I think like most large companies, they're going to test out the technology and show that there's a real business model within their clinics. I think that's going to, like anything, it's got to make sense for them. And the partnership often in these types of scenarios, once it demonstrates that there's a commercial logic that works.
Exclusivity makes sense at that point.
Yeah, anything can happen, right?
Yeah.
And that's why I think there's an interesting opportunity here. But to be clear, they don't have a deal yet with EssilorLuxottica. It's just that they've press released that they're in discussions, and so obviously a deal like that would be a game changer for Diagnos. But I mean, there's with or without EssilorLuxottica, there's scope. There's dozens of large chains that would want to do business with them over time, and you still have to realize that the eye clinic business, and if you just tangibly look down the street from where you are, that's it's more than 50% of the market are independent, kind of sole proprietorships that just there's an eye doctor in there and they sell frames, and so there's that individual market as well. So there's a lot of potential customers for this type of technology, but obviously it makes sense for Diagnos to go after the bigger chain players first. But they have a long runway of people who are interested in, will be interested in this, and there's other ways also they can get integrated into the technology in the space. There's no question that the camera makers are going to want to integrate AI in their cameras. They're several of them are on record of wanting to do this. So the idea, whether they're going to do it themselves or partner with somebody, a solution that's out there that's already approved by the major regulatory bodies, there's only a handful of players that make sense. So Diagnos is one of those.
Before I let you get back to your busy day, I want to
Yeah.
briefly touch on the share price, because the
Yeah.
company, the stock has dragged. Obviously, some of that has been a drop in revenues through COVID.
Yeah.
That's all understandable, but right now it presents itself at a low. And for me, with all the blue sky, with all the deals that have been done, with all the clear work that's been achieved, and the technology that obviously works, the share price doesn't make a lot of sense to me, other than in a general Canada doesn't really understand biotech and health tech kind of way. Traditionally, companies in this space have struggled in Canada. In the US, they fly. But in Canada, there's been a little bit of a gap between the investors and
Yeah.
the companies. Do you think that's what's happening here?
There's a disconnect there. It's something very odd here, because AI companies like this that aren't even FDA approved
Mm-hmm.
have valuations that are like multiples higher than this. There's a company called Digital Diagnostics that has it's going, you know, they're focused on AI, and they have an approved solution that's a bit more complicated than Diagnosis, because it actually comes with a very, very high-end camera you have to buy, so it's much more capital intensive than just the software solution. So it's an autonomous AI, as well as they've done something similar, but in the dermatology space. But this is a company that doesn't have I would say very meaningful commercial traction in the marketplace, and is, I think, raised more money in US dollars than, like, you know, quite a bit more than Diagnosis market cap. So their valuation's got to be in the hundreds. I don't know, you know, it's private, so I don't know what the valuation is, but it's in the hundreds of millions. And, you know, they have good AI, it's a good story, but they don't have anywhere near the level of commercial validation that Diagnos has. So we'll see, and there's really a disconnect there.
Yeah.
And
there are certainly companies in the diabetes tracking space, as an example, that have multi-billion-dollar valuations that are much more invasive than what Diagnos has. But for me, I look at the long term on this thing. I don't see a lot of risk in Diagnos. I feel like it's been showing in its colors that it's doing the work, that it's making contacts, that it's making deals, and a lot of biotech, health tech companies are very speculative. You're going to be paying for growth for 5 years and not necessarily seeing any revenue, whereas Diagnosis is already at that revenue stage.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's small potatoes revenue for now, but what I invariably what I see is the company sort of quarter over quarter just growing the revenue base as they roll out into more locations, sort of with New Look, with some of their other contracts. Obviously, if this Essilor deal comes to pass, you know, it's inevitable that they're not going to be doing this for you know, a company of that size is not interested in a nickel and dime revenues. They want to really drive these tests in their locations, and another, you know, leg of their own revenue, and creating a recurring revenue relationship with their, you know, their customers, and also helping identify, or being a location where people are looking for some basic healthcare beyond just for their eyes, right? So that developing a stronger relationship with the client. And the last thing I'll say beyond the diabetic retinopathy, and you talked about this at the beginning, is that there are a number of conditions where there's evidence that looking at retinal photographs and identifying certain patterns is a way of diagnosing them, notably for stroke. There's obviously other eye conditions too, like glaucoma and a number of other types of conditions, which, you know, the company's doing R&D in that space as well. But like I said, stroke prevention, they're going to be starting a trial, or they've already started a trial, I believe, in the US, or it's, you know, about to start in the next couple of weeks in that area as well. So, you know, you can layer on other tests they can do with the same photo, you know, very similar, you know, technology that's in place. So it would just add on potential, you know, dollars per photo, basically, and screen people, and the eye doctors themselves become more an element of providing primary care to some people, And so they develop a more valued relationship with their customers. So it's very interesting technology, and there's like I said, there's multiple applications beyond what they're already doing, and it replaces the mundane tasks for the eye doctor. It allows them to do more value-added services or see more patients in a day. So it's a win-win.
The one thing that I think is an intangible that never shows up on an analyst sheet is when I talk to the CEO of Diagnos, he is the happiest cat around. Like, he is so proud and happy with how his company is going right now. It's a giveaway a lot of the time. I'm asking him hard questions, and he's just having a great old time of it. He's built a company that he really believes in.
Well, they have very good momentum. They've been doing a lot of stuff. I mean, COVID was really tough for them, but the stock price is something else, because it's not moving in the right direction. But therein lies the opportunity. The way I look at it, and this is pretty impressive technology to get this started, to get this approved. There's some players in the space. You may have heard of this company. It's called Google. They tried to do this, and they're pretty good at AI. And I'm sure their AI is very competitive with Diagnosis, but they were unable to make it work in real world situations. So it only worked with, from what I understand. I mean, I don't have all the specific details, but there's some articles on this. They couldn't make it work with every camera. So there's some stuff that this little company out of Montreal, my town, that they've been able to do that other people haven't really been able to do as well. I mean, there are other players in the space, but for a company to get where they're at, sign some deals, talking to the industry's biggest player in a very serious way, is testament to the gumption and the grit at the company. And like I said,
I always say those large players do a lot better due diligence than I do, and if they're doing deals with the company, it's a really good sign.
Yep.
All right. Well, with that, Stefan, I'm going to let you get on with your day. Thank you, man. This has been a great conversation. Diagnos is the company for those who are interested. We've got plenty of coverage on Equity.Guru about the detail of what's going on, but I think if you've listened to the last 25 minutes, you've pretty much got it in a nutshell. Great opportunity, great company, and we're interested to see what's going to happen going forward.
Wonderful. It was great chatting with you, and don't forget to get your eyes checked. Okay.
Always.
All right.
Thanks, man. Have a great day.
All right.